Welcome to Mind Decoded, where we explore the psychology behind human behavior. Let's decode today's topic. Your brain replays conversations from 3 years ago at 2 a.m. You analyze decisions that don't matter. You notice patterns nobody else sees. And everyone tells you to stop overthinking. Here's what they're missing. Overthinking isn't a bug in your brain. It's a feature of high cognitive processing. Psychology research shows that people who overthink score higher on measures of creativity, problem solving, and threat detection. Your brain won't stop thinking because it's designed to find solutions, predict outcomes, and process complexity. This isn't anxiety, this is intelligence. Let me show you what's actually happening in your brain. Neuroscientist Marcus Reichel discovered the default mode network in 2001. This is a group of brain regions that activate when you're not focused on external tasks. When you're staring out the window, lying in bed before sleep, taking a shower, your default mode network turns on and your brain starts thinking. Not about what's in front of you, about everything else. Past conversations, future scenarios, hypothetical problems, social dynamics. Most people's default mode network produces random mind wandering. But in people with high cognitive ability, the default mode network doesn't wander randomly. It works. It analyzes. It problem solves. Neuroscientist Kalina Christoph at UBC found that people who score higher on intelligence tests show more activity in the default mode network during rest periods. Their brains are literally doing more thinking when they're supposed to be resting. This isn't a disorder. This is your brain using idle time for background processing. Before we begin, a quick disclaimer. This content is for educational and informational purposes only and should not be considered medical, psychological, or mental health advice. If you're experiencing mental health concerns, please consult with a qualified mental health professional. Here's why you replay conversations. Your brain has a simulator. Neuroscientists call it episodic future thinking, but what it really does is run simulations. When you replay a conversation, your brain isn't stuck in the past. It's extracting patterns. What did that person's tone imply? What did I miss? What should I say differently next time? This replay isn't rumination, it's learning. Psychologist Susan Nolan Hoeksema studied rumination versus reflection. Rumination is repetitive focus on distress without problem solving. Reflection is analytical processing that leads to insight. When you replay conversations, you're usually reflecting, not ruminating. Your brain is updating its social prediction models. The problem is other people can't see the output. They see you quiet at dinner, staring into space, clearly thinking about something. They assume you're anxious or upset. What they don't see is your brain running 17 simultaneous scenarios about a work problem, evaluating potential solutions, identifying edge cases, predicting how different people will respond. You're not anxious. You're processing. But because the work is invisible, people mistake deep thinking for emotional distress. Now let's talk about why intelligent people overthink decisions. Your brain has more active connections between the prefrontal cortex and posterior regions. Neuroscientist Richard Heyer's studies using brain imaging found that people with higher IQ scores show more efficient neural networks but also more activity in regions associated with abstract reasoning and pattern recognition. When you face a decision, your brain automatically generates more possibilities than other people's brains generate. More options, more consequences, more variables. You're not overthinking. Your brain is computing more scenarios because it can see more scenarios. Psychologist Barry Schwartz calls this the paradox of choice. More options make decisions harder, not easier. But here's what he missed. The difficulty isn't the problem. The depth is the advantage. When you spend 20 minutes deciding between two similar products, you're not wasting time. You're running cost-benefit analyses, predicting future regret, considering secondary effects. Most people make fast decisions and then regret them later. You make slow decisions and rarely regret them. The overthinking is front-loaded regret prevention. Here's what happens while you sleep. Your brain doesn't stop. During REM sleep, your default mode network activates and your brain processes the day's information. It consolidates memories, identifies patterns, generates insights. Neuroscientist Matthew Walker's research at Berkeley shows that REM sleep is when your brain makes creative connections between seemingly unrelated information. This is why you wake up at 3 a.m. with sudden clarity about a problem. Your default mode network was working on it while you slept. It found a solution and woke you up to tell you. This isn't insomnia. This is your brain doing exactly what highly active brains do. They solve problems in the background and surface solutions whenever they're ready. The creativity link is real. Psychologist Jordan Peterson analyzed the relationship between intelligence and creativity. People who score high on openness to experience and intelligence show more activity in brain regions associated with divergent thinking. When you're overthinking, your brain is making unusual connections, seeing patterns, generating novel solutions. Psychologist Scott Barry Kaufman found that people who report frequent daydreaming and mind-wandering score higher on creative achievement tests. What looks like distraction is actually your brain working in diffuse mode, making connections that focused thinking can't make. But here's where it becomes a problem. When your default mode network is too active, it interferes with present moment focus. Neuroscientist Judson Brewer at Brown found that experienced meditators show less default mode network activation during meditation. They've trained their brains to quiet the background processor when it's not needed. The goal isn't to stop your brain from thinking. The goal is to control when it thinks deeply versus when it focuses externally. You need both modes. Social situations are harder for overthinkers. Here's why. When you're in a conversation, most people's brains are in reactive mode. Someone speaks, they respond. Simple. Your brain is in analytical mode. Someone speaks, your brain generates 5 possible interpretations of what they meant, considers 3 different response options, evaluates social consequences of each response, detects subtle emotional cues in their tone, all while they're waiting for you to say something. By the time you respond, there's a pause. People interpret the pause as awkwardness. They don't realize you just did more social processing in 3 seconds than they do in 3 minutes. Neuroscientist Ralph Adolphs studied social cognition and found that people with higher cognitive ability show more activation in the temporal parietal junction during social reasoning tasks. This brain region is involved in theory of mind, understanding what others are thinking and feeling. Your brain is running more complex social simulations. This makes you better at predicting behavior and understanding motivation. But it also makes real-time conversation harder because you're processing more data than the interaction requires. Here's the evolutionary advantage. Psychologist David Buss studied evolutionary psychology and found that the ability to simulate future scenarios and predict outcomes was a massive survival advantage. The person who could think through all the ways a plan might fail was more likely to survive than the person who acted impulsively. Your overthinking ancestors survived. The underthinking ancestors didn't. You inherited a brain optimized for scenario planning and threat detection. In the modern world, there are fewer physical threats, but your brain still runs the same software. It detects social threats, financial threats, career threats, relationship threats. Constantly scanning, constantly analyzing. This feels like anxiety, but it's actually vigilance. The rumination trap is real though. When overthinking becomes repetitive loops without progress, that's when it shifts from useful processing to harmful rumination. Psychologist Edward Watkins distinguishes between constructive and unconstructive repetitive thought. Constructive repetitive thought has a purpose, makes progress, and reaches conclusions. Unconstructive repetitive thought loops endlessly without resolution. The difference isn't the thinking itself. It's whether the thinking moves forward. If you're replaying the same conversation for the 10th time and gaining no new insight, that's rumination. If you're analyzing it from a new angle each time, that's reflection. Here's the practical framework. Your brain's processing power is an asset, not a liability. But assets need management. When your default mode network is generating useful analysis, let it run. When it's looping on unsolvable problems, you need to interrupt it. Neuroscientist Amishi Jha's research on attention training shows that brief mindfulness practice can help you notice when your brain has shifted from productive thinking to unproductive rumination. The goal isn't to stop thinking. It's to direct the thinking toward problems that have solutions. Physical movement helps. When you're stuck in a mental loop, your brain is stuck in one neural pattern. Walking, running, or any rhythmic movement activates different brain regions and can break the pattern. Neuroscientist Marilee Opposo at Stanford found that walking increases creative thinking by 60% on average. The movement doesn't just distract you. It activates different neural networks that can find solutions the stationary networks couldn't find. Writing externalizes the thinking. When you write down what you're thinking about, you convert internal abstract processing into external concrete form. This allows your prefrontal cortex to analyze the thoughts rather than just generate them. Psychologist James Pennebaker's research on expressive writing shows that writing about complex thoughts and emotions reduces intrusive thinking. The writing doesn't stop the thinking. It completes it. Your brain was trying to reach a conclusion. Writing helps you reach it. Here's what you need to understand. Society tells you to stop overthinking because most people's brains don't work the way yours does. They experience thinking as effortful. You experience it as automatic. They need to force their brain to analyze deeply. Your brain does it whether you want it to or not. When they tell you to relax and stop thinking, they're giving advice that works for their neurology, not yours. Your brain won't stop thinking. And trying to force it to stop just creates more thinking about why you can't stop thinking. The goal isn't to think less. The goal is to think effectively. Direct your brain's processing power toward problems that matter. Let it run scenarios and generate solutions. But recognize when it's looping unproductively and redirect it. Your overthinking isn't a flaw that needs fixing. It's a high-powered processor that needs proper direction. Understanding that changes everything. And that's how the mind works. If this helped you understand yourself better, subscribe for weekly psychology insights. Thanks for watching.